Today's policy session for the Phoenix City Council for February 21st, 2017. We have a quorum present. We're going to start our meeting by asking council members whether they have information and or follow-up requests for staff or the public. Members of the council? Councilman Waring, please.
Councilman DeCiccio makes his apologies. He's actually at a funeral today. He really wanted to be here for this discussion, but he couldn't be here for personal circumstances.
Thank you very much. Other council members? Councilman Nowakowski, please.
Thank you, Mayor. Well, this evening, we're going to be having a meeting at South Mountain Community Center that's right off of Alta Vista and 2nd Street. We're going to be talking about the light rail going down South Mountain, and we would just like to hear some of the input from the community out there, especially the stakeholders that own property along Central Avenue, all the way from the I-17 to Baseline. So come on down, let us hear your opinions, and let's build a light rail that's fit for all. The other thing is I just want to thank everyone who came out to the Levine Barbecue. Great success. We did the cow milking this year, came in 2nd place. Representative Rios beat me out by just a hair. So next year we're going to have to practice a little better. I think our city manager came in, was it 2nd to the last or last? 2nd to the last. So we're going to have to improve our milking skills here. And past Saturday we attended the South Mountain Environmental Educational Center celebration of their 1st anniversary. Congratulations to all those individuals that help out and volunteer out in their parks. It turned out great. Our kids had a great time. They learned a lot about the desert plants and desert animals, and we took a hike. It was perfect weather. It was a little sprinkly, but we had a fun time out there. And this coming Saturday, February 25th, my office will be hosting a forum, Know Your Rights. It's at Desert West Community Center at 11 a.m. We're partnering up with the the Consulate Corps of Arizona. We're going to have the consulate offices from Mexico, Guatemala, El Salvador, Ecuador, and attorneys, and they'll be answering questions that people have about just what's happening right now with the immigrant issues and with our new president and all the new laws that are passing. So there's a lot of people out there that are scared, and basically the consulates will be out there, and immigrant lawyers will be out there also trying to answer any questions that people might have. This weekend, when I was attending different events, people are very concerned right now, and there's a lot of talk. So we just want to make sure that if you're not committing a crime, you shouldn't worry about our police officers. Our police officers are here to protect and to serve everyone. If you break the law, it doesn't matter if you're here documented or undocumented, you're going to go to jail. And I think that's the message that I've been telling people. So our police officers, once again, are here to protect and to serve all people and not to be afraid to call on police officers. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Councilman Nowakowski. Obviously, I'm really disappointed to hear about your performance in Levine, but don't cry over spilt milk.
That's a good one, Mayor.
Councilwoman.
Thank you. That was a good one. I only have one announcement, and that's to join me for a community chat co-hosted by my district and District 5, and the topic is about how the city and Valley Metro are working together to address concerns and improve security measures along the light rail. And it will be held on March the 9th from 6 to 8 p.m. at Honor Health John C. Lincoln Medical Center in their Barb's Conference Room. The address for the hospital is 250 East Dunlap. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councilman Williams.
Thank you, Mayor. I want to congratulate the Chinese Week Committee. They had their banquet, the last celebration. They had a great turnout. Thank heavens they had it the week before when the sun was shining. But the dinner was probably had close to 250, 300 people there. It was well attended. And I just want to tell Elaine congratulations and acknowledge Paula West and her cohort that Rick. They did an excellent job, as usual, helping coordinate all the events. They complained that they think Margaret T. Hance may be too small for their event next year. It was so large this year. On Saturday, I attended the community open house at the United Islamic Center of Arizona. It was an open house for the neighbors, for anyone. It was, everyone was invited. I was very surprised and pleased at the turnout. There was standing room only, and it was an event to explain what the Muslim religion is about, how they wanted to interact with the community, and that they were friends, they were friendly to everyone, and they were very supportive, very peace-loving, and they just wanted the neighbors to know that. They had a question-answer period where very tough questions were asked, but they had a great panel that explained where they come from, what they believe in, and how they were going to be a supportive member of this community. It was very, very positive. Next Friday, this Friday, 24th, is the District 1 breakfast. It's at Metro Center at the hotel, and our speaker will be Scott Smith, CEO of RPTA. And then March 8th, mark your calendar, we're going to have the ribbon cutting for the Phoenix Conservatory of Music at Metro Center. They have new digs, they're expanding, and very popular, well done, and I really want to congratulate them for their commitment to providing music and arts in Northwest Phoenix. That's all. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you very much, Councilwoman. Councilwoman Pastor?
Thank you. This morning, I want to thank all those that attended the mentoring training breakfast. We had a good 20 people there, and we're on our way to meeting the 50 mentors by April. If you're willing to mentor, wanting to mentor big girls, big sisters, no, I can't remember. What is it? Big brothers, big sisters. Let me know, because we are looking for mentors. And we have all the details, and we can help assist you in getting on the pathway of doing the paperwork. We have upcoming home tours and street fairs. Coronado is this Sunday. Melrose Street Fair is March 4th. Sunday off Central Block Party for the Midtown neighborhood is Sunday, March 12th. Cherry Lynn home tour is March 19th. Come out and show your appreciation for the historic preservation and support local business. I was told at the Willow home tour that the mayor, and I am not sure who else, will be sitting in a dunk tank at the Melrose Street Fair. And I'm not sure if you're aware of that, but that's what several of the other home tour areas were trying to figure out what we would be doing. So I'm not sure what we're doing on that day. And then Read
I think
Across
you guys
America.
have increased the attendance, especially sitting place.
I said I would increase the attendance and also help sell tickets for the dunk tank. Read Across America is March 7th. I will be at Loma Linda School and participating, reading to a classroom full of young students and talking about the importance of literacy. And then William G. Harnrath plaque dedication. We will do that. He's considered the father of the Phoenix Park system. And so we'll be doing a naming of the entry garden and a rededication of the 1940 commemorative plaque in his honor. That is March 4th at 10 a.m. in Encanto Park.
Thank you very much, Councilwoman. I was not aware of the dunk tank obligation.
No, we want you, you have to be present.
Where are we all going to practice?
So when you serve in local government, as I have, I have been in many a dunk tank, and one dunk tank lesson I have learned is always be the first one in the dunk tank. The water gets dirty. No, I'm just telling you, Councilwoman. I'm just telling you. It's a lesson learned. Many years in this business. All right. Next, Councilman Valenzuela, please. You're next.
Thank you, Mayor. I have first some exciting news as this is Phoenix Startup Week, And this is something that will, it's been an annual event, and it's been an event that we are used to hearing about in other parts of the country, but Phoenix is truly becoming this hub for tech and innovation, entrepreneurship, and all week long there'll be some great events. In fact, this evening at Grand Canyon University, which is located in West Phoenix in District 5, we will have a great event this evening. So after this meeting, I'm happy to rush over and be part of it. And you can just Google Phoenix Startup Week at this point, or log on to our website, and there'll be some information there. And I also would like to just, for a moment, Phoenix lost a servant leader in Captain Crystal Rosanico. Phoenix Fire Captain has been on the job for more than 20 years, I believe 24 years on the job, and Captain Rosanico, several years ago, 2009, was involved while responding to an emergency. She and her crew were responding to an emergency and they were involved in a car crash while responding near I-17 and Northern, and Captain Rosanico received some pretty major injuries. After a year and a half of rehab, Captain Rosanico had an opportunity to retire, and she made it back onto a fire truck. And there's been several times where she had to deal with these complications from the injuries that she sustained in 2009. And this, just a couple of days ago, she passed away. And so just would like to ask everyone to pray for her family and anyone who knows Captain Rosanico. I've had the privilege to know her. She is incredibly dedicated to service, incredibly dedicated to the Phoenix Police Department and to our city. She is just fiercely loyal. It's impossible to run into Crystal and not see her smile. She's very, very positive, and we were a better fire service to have her. We're a better community to have had time with Crystal Rosanico, and I would just ask if we can just have a moment of silence for Captain Rosanico. I know that the details for services are now available, and you can log on to, I'm sure, the City of Phoenix website, Phoenix Fire's website, and we're hoping that everyone comes out and pays an honor to someone who paid the ultimate sacrifice. Crystal and her crew were racing at a moment's notice to put themselves between total strangers and danger, and in doing so, she paid the ultimate sacrifice. So if we can just have a moment of silence.
Thank you, Councilman.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councilman Valenzuela. The very thoughtful words about Captain Rosanico, and Chief Cockbrenner's here, just to say all of us up here send our best thoughts and wishes to you, the entire department, because I know it's not just a loss for Captain Rosanico's family, but for the entire family of Phoenix Fire, and we are with you during this difficult time. Thank you for your leadership. All right, any other, Councilwoman, Vice Mayor Gallego, do you have any comments?
I do, thank you. I want to congratulate Councilman Nowakowski on his second place finish. It was far better than my own. We even had our police commander for the area participate in the Levine cow milking contest. He was very careful to not place ahead of the chairman of the Public Safety Subcommittee, so showing good judgment, but he did place ahead of the city manager. So we all know where we stand. On a more serious note, I want to thank Councilman Valenzuela for that moving tribute, and join my colleagues in expressing my sympathies to the captain's family. Wanted to thank the police chief for coming out to Lindo Park Rec Center last week where we had a successful meeting and some quality conversations about improving the neighborhood. Coming up on Thursday, we will have the grand opening of the Biosciences Partnership Building, which is just the latest addition in our biomedical campus, which now has a $1.3 billion economic impact, and we're looking forward to continuing innovation on that campus. Also wanted to congratulate ASU on a great month so far with the Sustainability Solutions Festival. Some of the innovations we'll get to hear about later today were on display, and we're looking forward to more coming out of our partnership with Arizona State University. And that is it. Thank you, Mayor.
All right, thank you very much, Vice Mayor Gallego. Similar to the comments I made to Councilman Nowakowski regarding the poor performance at the cow milking contest, I feel your pain. All right, next. Thank you. Delayed reaction there. All right. Next on the agenda is a call for an executive session. Do we have a call for an executive session?
Mayor, in accordance with a properly posted notice and agenda, I move that the City Council, pursuant to Arizona Revised Statute, Section 38-431.02.a, meet in executive session on Tuesday, March 21st, 2017 at 1 p.m. in the East Conference Room, 12th floor at Phoenix City Hall, 200 West Washington Street, Phoenix, Arizona.
We have motion. Is there a second? All in favor say aye. Any opposed? Passes unanimously. We'll have a budget update from our city manager as part of our agenda. Is there any other updates, Mr. City Manager? We have a few items on today's agenda. The first item on today's agenda is our sustainability action plan. So I believe that our team, our sustainability team, Karen Peters, Deputy City Manager, Mark Hartman, who is our Chief Sustainability Officer, will present to us the update on our plan. Is this an action item or for information only?
It's action.
It is action. We're asking for action by the council. Ms. Peters.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. I'm Karen Peters, Deputy City Manager. Today, we will report about the city's progress toward the environmental sustainability goals set by this council and ask for additional guidance. The reports in your packet detail some significant progress, which I'm pleased to say is a result of hard work and collaboration among our city departments, as well as embrace of the goals by the community. Your 2050 environmental sustainability goals are already driving innovation as well as efficiencies and cost savings. Our report today will highlight the city's overall results and then focus on greenhouse gas emissions and how we are meeting council's specific goals in those areas. We will also ask for council's endorsement of an updated interim goal for greenhouse gas emissions from city operations. With me, our Chief Sustainability Officer, Mark Hartman, and Environmental Programs Administrator, Joe Giudice, to present and answer any questions you have. They've brought a special guest whom they'll introduce momentarily, but now I'll ask Mark to go ahead with today's presentation.
Thank you, and good afternoon, Mayor and members of council. It's actually my distinct privilege today to kind of go over the highlights of what staff have accomplished in the various departments, as well as, for that matter, this council. The sustainability report included in your packet actually highlights both the recent accomplishments over the last year and a half that we've adopted towards becoming the most sustainable desert city in the world, as well as its next steps that we're about to undertake. I did want to walk through various specific related to the ask today, specific achievements within departments that I wanted to highlight as very significant. With first of all, with transportation, our goal to make walking and cycling and transit commonly used and most importantly enjoyed within our community. Some recent actions that are very significant are first of all improvements to our bus and light rail, appreciated not only by the community as a whole, but actually the participants who can take advantage of those new routes and new light rail extension, and even as mentioned earlier, the upcoming extension down to South Phoenix, very important overall. And also we've achieved our 2-year anniversary has passed for grid bikes, been very successful with over 12,000 registered users. Pretty remarkable achievement, and 5 times those users have cycled around the globe. So pretty significant in over 140,000 miles of riding. And also significant with grid bikes is how it actually helps utilization of the light rail and bus routes, as people who are more, like say perhaps a mile within our light rail can actually use it effectively for locations that have grid bikes. So very important part of our transportation plan. And also along with that, adding, I guess last year, 55 miles of bike lanes, very important as well for transportation. For waste, the long-term goal is zero waste, but from staff, the focus has very much been on achieving our 2020, and they've been bringing forward many projects related to achieving our 2020 goal of a 40% diversion. Significant along with that is where we used to transmit and transport 34,000 tons of palm fronds out to our landfill. Now we're actually developing a very partnership to actually recycle those in a usable livestock feed. So really significant. I hope that's first of many businesses out at our Resource Innovation Campus that can actually start new businesses and create new jobs within the community. Also significant as we're developing our compost facility out at the Waste Transfer Station. That'll be ready this year, be very using newest technology that'll actually help in really getting the most compost out of the facility, as well as really lays the groundwork. We can start collecting organic waste voluntarily from the community. And lastly, as far as significant accomplishments, is the High School Sustainability Officer Program. It was launched as first in the nation. We've had a partnership the last 3 years with the Bioscience High School, and so this year we've actually expanded to all the Phoenix Union High School District schools, 14 of the 16 schools. I'd like to particularly recognize you, Councilwoman Laura Pastor, for your leadership in youth and education, and your leadership on the governing board. Thank you. The board has actually been very supportive of the launch of this program and expansion to all the schools. And a special guest hinted at earlier today is Kevin Goddard. He's a sustainability officer at the Bioscience High School, and he's going to give examples of exactly what types of programs are implementing. So welcome, Kevin, to your first council, and
thank you very much. Today. Well, good afternoon, Mayor and members of council. It's a pleasure to speak with you as one of the 500,000 voices of students in Phoenix. As Mark said, with the Sustainability Officer Program, this is our first year expanding to 14 of the 16 Phoenix Union schools. We're very excited to incorporate them all on this motion and get them all involved. Some of the specific projects we started working on so far is integrating recycling bins in all of the schools, starting a compost program, and pushing Phoenix Union schools closer to our goal of zero waste. Additionally, we're working on several different hands-on projects on campus to show students and get them to engage with more sustainability-related ideas, some of which being building a solar charging station, constructing a biodiesel and solar energy-powered car on campus, as well as just public outreach programs in the community and expanding to the local areas around our schools. And we're very excited to be a part with all these unique opportunities that this program presents students to get engaged with and start making change as well. So thank you for everything that you do to promote sustainability and make Phoenix a more sustainable city for our generation. Additionally, something that would add to this is that ASU has offered a $5,000 Sustainability Champion Scholarship that I have had the fortunate opportunity to apply for with priority consideration being a sustainability officer, and they're also working to promote sustainable students in Phoenix. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much. We're going to continue with the presentation?
Yes, continue its presentation.
Okay, then we make comments for Kevin and his leadership at the high school level, and that incredible partnership with ASU as well for the scholarships. Okay.
Yes, great program where they've actually given priority to all the sustainability officers to a priority scholarship to apply, and so a very great partnership with ASU and the school district. So some great programs that we have around waste. The other ones I wanted to highlight, water stewardship, to maintain a clean and reliable 100-year supply of water, not just for dunk tanks, but also for the community. From recent accomplishments from water, pretty significant, I'd really like to highlight is that since 1996, it's now latest stats, latest update, 34% drop in water use per capita since 1996. Pretty significant. And when we talk about our 100-year supply of water and our efforts and our innovations in water, it's really the envy as I talk to other communities that while other communities have sort of been talking about water stewardship for the last 10 years, we've been essentially the last century been thinking about water here. And so very much leading in the nation on our thinking and about water innovation. And a perfect example is that last year, reclaiming 84% of our wastewater. Pretty remarkable. Other communities are 2 to 4% typically. So we're really being able to use wastewater for beneficial uses. As far as clean air, when I'm out in the community, and I'm sure the council as well, I hear a lot from the community about clean air and their desire to see have clean quality air, especially in recognition of increased asthma rates and particulate matter and dust. Do you have as far as an update on the clean air and recent accomplishments? We this year are actually going to meeting federal health standards for particulate matter. So this has been actions of this council and previous councils. Certainly made efforts over the years, and it's always been a focus to try to improve local air quality. So it's great to actually see us meeting these EPA standards for dust, even in our desert environment here. And lastly, around ozone standards, it's also been, there's been a goal established 2008 federally around ozone standards, and this council and previous have also done a lot of work in partnership with the whole region and with the county on improving compliance with ozone standards, and it's likely we'll meet that in 2017, so that's a great applause for all those involved for really moving the dial on that and continuing to make progress, and as new standards are established going forward to also make progress on those as well. And then really, as these lead up, we wanted to highlight around, including in your report, our greenhouse gas goals. First established, Council actually established these policies, first of all, to develop a community-wide inventory. So not just for our own operations, but a city-wide inventory of what our whole community does around greenhouse gases. And in the context of our long-term goal adopted last year to reduce community emissions by 80 to 90% by 2050, with a long-term goal of carbon neutrality by 2060. And those goals, pretty significant. And so looking at giving an update on those reports of where we are, kind of announcing what happened in regard to those. So we came out and actually I'd like to recognize Joe's group and his efforts in producing the greenhouse gas report, as well as a partnership with ASU to help us along with that greenhouse gas inventory, and we're the final producers of that report. You may note it's a 2012 greenhouse gas inventory, and that's because we're establishing a baseline. So we wanted to go as far back as possible that we had reliable data. So we have our 2012 community emissions report, and it's actually some very interesting news. So some key findings were, whether you knew it, buildings in Phoenix have lower carbon pollution than many other leading cities. How low? 50% lower than Las Vegas, Houston, Austin, and Denver. And part of that is our mild climate and things such as Palo Verde nuclear plant that provide low carbon electricity, but really a lot of our actions as well. 75% of new homes in Phoenix are Energy Star related, so really some good actions regarding buildings in Phoenix and in the region. And we're still slightly higher than some of the top cities like Seattle and San Francisco, but can still make some moves. We're really close. I would say that we have a competitive advantage here because of our mild climate, that we could actually very easily move into a leadership as far as efficient buildings, because for us to achieve sort of really high performance buildings, we'd actually need to add a lot less insulation than what they require to do in other communities, so we can actually achieve it much more cost effectively than other communities can. Another finding, interestingly, transportation in Phoenix has higher carbon pollution than many other leading cities. Where we were much less than Las Vegas and Houston, we're actually 20% higher than them in our transportation emissions. And almost double that of cities that have mass transit. So cities like New York and San Francisco. And I think this really speaks very much to how important and our Transportation 2050 plan is. That it's really significant that as we move to triple our light rail and really expand bus and light rail service and include bike routes, this is really important for us to continue to be a leading city and continue to be a more leading city globally. And so very important around transportation. And so next steps, really, now that we have a baseline greenhouse gas inventory, really to set a sort of a shorter-term goal of what we can get to by 2025 and work with community and stakeholders, the building and development community and other stakeholders, to really set an action plan for what we can cost-effectively do, certainly voluntary programs, voluntary things that we could do around really what we can reach by 2025. So that's what we're working on over this coming year. And then I really wanted to highlight what have we, as within our own operations. So this would be our municipal greenhouse gas inventory, kind of a third report included along with this council report, is what have we done around our own operations. Originally, I guess the history of this was back in 2008. We set a goal of a 5% reduction by 2015. And by 2012, we'd actually surpassed that goal and we're at 7%. So we said, okay, we need to have a new goal. And this council established a new one at 15% by 2015. And when talking with staff actually that were there for the adoption of that goal, they actually thought, oh, it's a little bit ambitious, the 15%. But lo and behold, 0.6% reduction, we sort of surpassed that goal, showing we can set goals and surpass them. And so really, as we move forward, we want to look at, okay, where can we go to next? But I did want to highlight, how did we get there? Like, what was the result? How did we get to 15% reduction? And what some of those were, we did some street lighting and all of our traffic signals conversions. The blue bars you see there are actually the magnitude of how much savings we had from each of those as far as greenhouse gas emissions. So street lighting and traffic signals were some. Our fleet fuels, although we primarily did most of our conversions prior to 2005, we've still made good progress since then. So fleet fuels have contributed, and building retrofits, both in our operations and out of aviation, definite reducing our energy use. Probably water, very significant, and the solar plant out at Lake Pleasant, a definite contributor to that. And finally, landfill gas capture. And here's the things we can do, and I'll just highlight 4 significant things that are already underway here at the city to really move the dial on where we're headed. First of all, adopted LED streetlights. You can see the magnitude of that, of how significant that is as far as accomplishing reductions from streetlights, expanding use of alternative fuels, expanding building retrofits to get to our 20% reduction of really cost savings from the city, and then additional opportunities to capture additional landfill gas. So those particular actions continued with looking at what utilities are planning on doing around greening their electrical supply. Those two together, we really estimate from staff perspective that a 40% reduction by 2025 is really achievable. It's certainly a stretch goal, but if we kind of do all of these actions kind of outlined, that's very achievable. So it's with that we bring forward this recommendation to this council to approve a new goal of a 40% reduction in greenhouse gases by 2025 for our own operations, to lead by example. So I'd like to leave this recommendation to this council, as well as the comments on the rest of this report to you now.
All right, thank you very much. Is there any other presentation right now by staff? Stacy Champion, who was marked in favor of the staff recommendation, would you like to provide testimony before this council? Great to see you. Thanks for coming down.
Greetings, Mayor, Council. My name is Stacy Champion, and though I do have many sustainability-driven clients, I am here today purely as a Phoenix resident and citizen. I commend both staff and council for really pushing the envelope, especially over the last 5 years. With that said, I think that you guys could go much further, excuse me, in delving into especially the 2050 goals. And I'm just gonna kind of ramble some stuff off in no particular order. But there is talk of buildings constructed after 2050 working towards being net zero energy. And I would like to see this council understand that this action really needs to start happening now. As far as delving into a lot of the ordinances and policies that are going to need to change to get us to those 2050 goals. And given the fact that we are in the bullseye of climate change, even though there are some people who don't believe it's real, it is. So I would like to see us work harder towards whether that's incentivizing LEED certified buildings. I know that there was a push for energy benchmarking, and that there was some legislation banning that being mandated. I don't know why we couldn't potentially find kind of a public-private partnership to create a voluntary energy benchmarking standard here that people could take part in if they want to. In 2015, 40% of total US energy consumption was from residential and commercial buildings. So allowing people to start benchmarking, to share best practices for data would be great. Mandating cool roofs for new buildings and tear-offs can decrease temperature both inside and out by 4 to 7 degrees. Looking at pervious pavement versus asphalt, which also could help with the ozone levels, would be a good thing to look at. Reinvigorating our parklet program, which no one has really done much with. And then with the push toward density and the high influx of apartments, I'm literally not going to give up on the recycling for multifamily and commercial in the city, because I think we need to go in that direction. And I also think that the millennials who are moving into these places have an expectation and actually care about sustainability. So I understand it's a complicated issue, but to just simply not address it isn't going to get us there. And then also, tied back to just a comprehensive climate change adaptation and resiliency plan. I know a lot of these things address it, but if we are not willing to talk about what is wrong, we're not going to be able to fix it. So I would like to see more delving into that. My friend Mick Dalrymple, who works for ASU, who I'm sure a bunch of you know, has had an idea for a 1 degree initiative for many years, and things like mandating the cool roofs and some of those other things could help that. But if we're not being honest about the fact that we've broken heat records every year, we're going to have some issues that tie into anything. And then just lastly, sustainability really truly should be a part of every single department's conversations in the city from a holistic public health standpoint, and it really needs to touch every socioeconomic class for it to be truly effective. So thank you.
Thank you very much for your testimony. I have no other cards, so I'll now turn to members of the council. Councilman?
Just a quick question on what Ms. Champion, one of the things Ms. Champion brought up, and this is more to staff. Where are we with multi-housing and commercial when it comes to recycling?
Mayor, Councilman Valenzuela, that currently our city ordinances prohibit us from doing commercial pickup. And so in order to do multifamily facilities, we would need a code change to allow us to do that. But in the interim, we have established eco stations in each council district where anyone, targeting apartment dwellers, of course, can bring recyclable materials to the eco station near them. They're located in parks that are strategically identified to be close to multifamily hubs. So we are definitely in agreement that we need to make some progress with multifamily, but we're diligently working on that.
And I appreciate that. I think we have some real champions with city staff on especially this issue. And if it's a code that we have to look at, I think this council really should take those steps and actually take a look at that, because those are some pretty aggressive goals that we have set out for ourselves. And I think multi-housing is something, we have to make it easier for people who live in these units, and many people choose to live in an apartment or condo than a house, but we should make recycling more challenging if they choose to live in an apartment community or a condo, and we should take a look at that. It's for the betterment of our community.
And just to give you an idea on the commercial, so I just moved my office, and so we share a 2-yard dumpster with some neighbors because we're all small businesses, so we don't produce a lot of waste. We have waste management as a service provider. And I just called them recently to ask about recycling, and the charge for recycling is actually higher than waste. And so you get into, just especially for small businesses, it being either not, mostly cost prohibitive to small businesses, but to recycle, in my opinion, should not cost more than to send things to the landfill. And so, so I think that there needs to be some very deep conversations with the private waste industry and city. And you guys know I've been shouting through the bullhorn on this for 5 years now, but like that sucks. Like that I would have to pay more, and I probably will because I'm me right now. We're taking all our recycling home, but that is going to need to change, especially as people become more and more educated and want to do the right thing for our future generations.
Councilwoman Pastor?
I'm not sure what subcommittee, I want to say transportation and infrastructure. But,
It is.
We have had this conversation, and I would believe we could revisit it, but my understanding is not just the code. My understanding it's deeper and more complex than just the code, and dealing with the multifamily associations and all the dynamics that go along with it. And I guess my question, and this could be in the subcommittee, what would the cost be? Because I think that's the whole, really the other piece of this whole puzzle.
Mayor, Councilwoman Pastor, I'm not prepared to talk about the costs of that today, but you are right that there are many factors that influence the complexity of multifamily recycling, including the higher contamination rates that we see, which make it a much more expensive endeavor. Nonetheless, staff is working, and we'd be happy to come to subcommittee and talk in more detail about it.
Chairwoman Williams, would you be willing to put that on? Okay, thank you.
Councilman Nowakowski, please.
Some of the things that you talked about is our street lights, our fleet fuel, the building, electricity, solid waste, but there's a couple other things, is there something else we can do with improving our water services and also our traffic signals to reduce?
Mayor, Councilman Nowakowski, so we've converted now 100% of our traffic signals, so that project is basically complete. So those are all LED right now, so we kind of recognize those savings. And then, of course, soon, within 2 years, we'll have 100% of our streetlights as well. So those two. And sorry, the other area you'd mentioned?
Water services.
Oh, water services. Yeah, no, absolutely. They are actually a real champion as far as energy reductions, as far as working to make more efficient pumps and those types of things, really taking advantage of utility incentives on those. I was really talking about the real key landmark ones that are real wholesale changes, pretty substantial, but certainly ongoing savings. And when we talk about a 20% reduction in buildings, a lot of that will be in the water department as well. So.
And then is there any type of incentives? Because when we talk about new development, especially within the downtown area, I know that we've always talked about reducing waste. And is there any type of incentives for developers to actually encourage them to do so?
Mayor, member of council, I did speak a little bit. I just left a little bit of a comment in the council report regarding some possible incentive programs we're looking at working with stakeholders and developing and launching this year. Bring them forward, bring them and brief council on these updates and the real opportunities of how to bring some incentive programs both on new construction and existing buildings, design of buildings, and so taking advantage of some previous funding we've received, part of Energize Phoenix from a number of years ago. There's some small residual funding left on that for energy efficiency. So looking at really bringing programs forward. And so we definitely see that as we bring forward some recommendations, as kind of indicated, we'll bring an action plan. We also wanted to bring forward, included in it, many programs as well and incentive programs for the community to improve, to really give them the extra push needed to really help them and transform that market.
Mayor, Councilman Nowakowski, in addition, I just wanted to add that Water Services Department has a partnership with the U.S. Department of Energy to really increase energy efficiency in the water plants and wastewater plants. So that partnership has been successful, and we are pleased to continue it and bring more efficiency programs forward.
And for those individuals watching right now, we were just talking about multifamily housing and some of the businesses that we don't provide the trash pickup. That's a part of our, would that increase the city services that we bill those individuals, or how is it different from single housing to multifamily housing, and why aren't we picking up trash and providing those services to multifamily housing, just to let individuals out there and watching saying, well, we never knew that the city doesn't pick up trash or recycle in apartment complexes and businesses.
Mayor, Councilman Nowakowski, as I said, I don't have cost information today. We would be very happy to bring that to subcommittee and brief you specifically on what that would look like. It is a significant increase in the amount of material, the trucks that would have to be available for that service and so forth. But sometimes these things offset one another, and I'd really want to have Public Works Department staff give you a full idea.
Thank you.
Councilwoman.
We have talked about this a couple times at subcommittee, and it really is a complex problem. If we're going to bring this back, I would prefer that you also contact the associations involved with the complexes, because what we learned before is, one, it can be more expensive, the contamination, but many of these older apartment houses have no space to put it, and there's no way a truck can get through to pick it up. And as we go forward, I'm hoping when we talk about some incentive to, or I take it for new buildings, I am guessing that you're saying also probably residential properties, that we have the home builders and the developers come to the table. They have the expertise, they know how to do it, and they would know how to save the money. I think it's important that we listen before we act.
All right, thank you very much. Other members of the council? Diane Barker, do you have comments before this council?
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. Diane Barker in District 7, and this issue is something close to my heart. I believe in a sustainable future, and you're talking specifically about apartment buildings or multi-dwellings, and the city does have some control in the fact that we own some of the buildings and seniors can use some education too, and probably are already doing some things that may not be shared, you know, in the community. So my suggestion would be that with your contractors and with all your contracts and dealings, you know, you've got more internal control with some of the departments and sustainability here at the city, but with your contractors, put this in your agreements with them that they, you know, will be trying to make the goal with the city to cut down on emissions and to do the recycling type of thing. And then the people that are the landlords that you have employed also for some of the senior buildings, they put out newsletters. And for them to train their staff in some of the sustainabilities, and then, you know, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make them sorry for, you know, making something that is an old saying, but it's true. You can't make them drink, but you can entice people to get excited about maybe earning awards and being publicized for some of their good ideas, and it's contagious. And the other thing I'd like to say, we can all ride share, and we can take the bus and the rail, and we can cut down tomorrow over half and hit that goal right there. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Ms. Barker. Now turn to the council members. Councilman Nowakowski.
I was just wondering, our multifamily housing, do we actually outsource that, or do we actually pick it up ourselves, and do we have recycling?
Mayor, Councilman Nowakowski, I am not certain of the answer to that. I do think that somewhere behind me, Public Works Director John Trujillo might be here, and if he's available to come forward and answer that question, that'd be terrific.
Thank you.
While he's coming forward, could we ask that, one of the things we talked about is recycling at the airport, and I would like to know what the status of that is.
Mayor, members of the council, in relation to the question asked by Councilman Nowakowski, related to city multifamily facilities, we do provide some services to them, and we are testing out recycling at those sites to see how that works. We are having some success at some sites and some not so successful at others, but we're working through the process and working with our housing department and figuring out how we can better educate and communicate the residents at each of those different sites. So the reason we're providing services at those multifamily facilities is because we own them. And our code allows us to provide service at city facilities. So we're testing it at some of these sites, and we're going through that process now.
Real quick, and you want to talk about the airport, and then we'll go back to Councilman
The
Nowakowski?
airport is doing a very good job in recycling. I think their recycling is up greater than 50%, and it's going to be going higher. We are working with them on our program for food waste, and once we get that out of their system, it's going to jump up quite a bit. So airport's doing a really good job at recycling at their facility.
Mayor?
Councilman.
Mr. Trio, is there an extra cost for that recycling, or was there a profit behind it for the airport, or do you know offhand? If not, maybe later on we can talk about it.
At this time, I don't have those numbers, but we can get that information for you.
I think that data can actually help businesses figure out if there's going to be an additional cost and how much it would be, and even in our multifamily housing, that we can use it as pilot programs to show the private sector that we can actually maybe cut down on costs, and or if it is a little bit, that they give a little, but we save the earth a lot, right? So, thank you.
Thank you very much. Vice Mayor?
Thank you so much. I am proud to be the councilwoman whose district includes the Bioscience High School, so thank you to Kevin Goddard for doing a great job on behalf of his campus and all of our school sustainability partnerships. That was a wonderful presentation. I also think this month it's worth celebrating the impact that our efforts on sustainability is having on our economy. I think right now we have in February about 10 different conferences that have come to our community, from sustainable business development to sustainable higher education initiatives. And it's wonderful to see that we are becoming a growing mecca for travel for sustainability conscious businesses, nonprofits, and academics. ASU has certainly been a great force in that, but having LEED certified buildings in our convention center and a green airport is also an important part of the city's commitment, as well as providing mass transit. So our sustainability efforts are having impacts beyond some of the direct metrics, and I think that's something we should continue to encourage. I think we're also getting on the map as an increasing center for green businesses, particularly on sustainable building products, but in other areas, including solar energy, water use, and semiconductors, and that's great for our economy as well. And I want to join my colleagues in expressing support for the city doing more at multifamily facilities. That's something I've been on the record for quite a while about, and I'm glad to see the eco stations and welcome our first one in District 8 at Esteban Park on Rozier. We have many multifamily residents who've expressed interest in making recycling easier, and the city's partnership there, and so I hope we'll see good success with the eco stations and expand that effort, but also look at on-site recycling, which is just so much easier. I've had a similar experience to Stacy Champions with being in multifamily and working with waste management, where if you wanted to dispose of batteries properly, you had to pay them to ship you a container, and then you paid the post office to ship it back, and it just didn't seem like a practical way to keep that waste out of our water system, which is a precious resource for us in the desert. So I do think there is more we can do in that area as we move towards our ambitious goals and becoming the most sustainable desert city. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Vice Mayor. Any other comments before this City Council? First off, I think it was an excellent presentation. So Karen and Mark and the team, you guys are doing a great job. Phoenix is getting a national reputation as a leader in this area. We didn't have that reputation not that many years ago, and I really think that the progress that's been made has been outstanding. Kevin Goddard, I love that program of adding chief sustainability officers to student councils. Obviously, if we're going to be successful long-term, it's got to be young people that lead the way. So your leadership, Phoenix Union High School District leadership, is huge. And I love the fact that ASU is, I'm not sure what the exact title is, but they're kind of giving priorities to our high school chief sustainability officers for scholarships to go to the Global Institute of Sustainability and continue on in that position, so you can be the next Mark Hartmans, if you will, of the future. We really need it. And so I'll certainly be supportive if anyone does want to make a motion on staff's recommendation to be even more ambitious in a shorter term time period for the 40% greenhouse gas reduction by 2025. We have set ambitious goals in the past, goals that frankly some of our staff were skeptical of whether it been able to meet. We've always exceeded them. And so as we've learned, as you set an ambitious goal, that sets the wheels in motion, if you will, so we can look in the mirror about more that we can do as a city. And frankly, I think this is more important now than ever. I think in Washington, they're probably going to go in a different direction relative to national goals on sustainability. And if the United States is going to keep our leadership position, it's going to be cities like Phoenix around the United States that step up our game. And so I think it's important that we set this very ambitious goal and then meet and exceed that goal. So I'll now turn to anyone if they have a motion to support the staff recommendation regarding a new ambitious goal for greenhouse gas reduction by 2025. Is there a motion?
I move the motion of a new goal of 40% greenhouse gas reduction by 2025. City operations.
I will second that.
You have a second?
I'm with the caveat, as long as it is affordable. And I depend on the city manager to make sure that every item that is redesigned, repurchased, we are able to fund, because we promised we wouldn't be adding anything new. So I know that the departments have been very cognizant of this, and they have incorporated and been very ingenious on many of the things they've done and found outside funding for some of them. So with that, I'd second it.
Okay, so the motion is to support staff recommendation. The second is yes, and with the request that it be cost effective. Councilwoman, you accept the second?
Yes, I do. My question is, this is just approving the new goal. It's not approving staff.
That's correct.
Okay.
There's no
Right,
staff
similar to what we've done in the
involvement.
past. We did in 2008, we did it in 2012. We met and exceeded both of those goals. Mark, because of Mark's leadership, we did vote on a 2050 plan. His point is, let's have, since 2012 was the last time we set a goal, and 2050 is a long ways away, let's set a more ambitious interim goal that now we would set off our staff and say, you got to go meet this goal. I would politely add that each and every time that we have set that goal, we have exceeded it and done it in a cost-effective way. And as we've learned, for example, with the LED light, it's going to save us money. It pays for itself and pays for it more, just like it's done with regard to when we have worked with the development community to push for more ambitious building code. It pays for itself with less energy consumption. And so consistently we've done that. Now, with the water, for example, we've supported our water department when they wanted to move around non-potable water so that we use it more efficiently on golf courses, et cetera. But that's a better use of our water system. And I think that investment has been a good long-term investment for the city. Other comments or questions? So the motion is in favor of staff recommendation with the caveat put forward by Councilman Williams. There was a second.
I have just a
Councilman.
quick comment. I'm absolutely supportive of this, and these are lofty goals, and we have to continue to take this very, very serious. And we throw around words like sustainable and recycle, and we throw 40%, 40 by 20. We start throwing all these numbers out there, and let's not set future councils up for failure. Let's not set future staff members up for failure. I'm very proud of the work that's being done in the city of Phoenix, especially by those that are at the table, especially you, Mr. Goddard. Thank you so much for being here. And Mr. Trujillo, who still might be in the room, is just one of the greatest ever. And we have to continue to take this serious. So I will be asking for briefings on how we are going to get here, how we're going to continue to raise the bar, and we're going to have tough conversations. And whether we decide to go forth or not, these things come with a dollar figure. But what we're gathering, what we're learning through efforts like Recycle Bank, it's actually, in the long haul, it'll save the city of Phoenix money. It'll save our constituency money. It's going to take an investment, and we have to have those conversations, those hard conversations. And so I am absolutely supportive of this, and I look forward to continuing the conversation.
All right. Excellent. Any other comments? By the way, probably the best thing we have done as a city to meet these goals and exceed them is our investment in transportation, because it has changed the built environment of this city. All of the multi-housing that Stacey Champion and others talked about, much of it has come from the city's decision to invest in transportation and all the economic development benefits that have gone along with that. Certainly, I would say that was a cost-effective investment, because it's resulted in so much great investment in the city, including advancements of our sustainability plan, as of other key investments from the city. Okay, there is a motion. There is a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? It passes unanimously. Next on the agenda is our public safety funds balancing plan, followed by our 5-year general fund forecast, which are very closely related. Do you want to take them as separate items, Mr. City Manager, or as a singular item?
Mayor, they are separate items. We will have ask the two chiefs, Chief Kalkbrenner and Chief Williams, to join us for the first item on the public safety balancing plan.
Thank you very much. So item 2 is a public safety funds balancing plan.
Thank you, Mayor. Budget and Research Director Jeff Barton, who has actually worked on this from way back when it started in 2010, will walk us through that. And then as I said, we do have the chiefs available if there are specific questions. I think the bottom line good news is Phoenix is hiring, and Jeff Barton will explain how and why we are doing that.
Mr. Barton.
Mayor, members of the council, good afternoon, and thank you for this opportunity. As Ed mentioned, I've been with this plan since 2010, so today's a good day that we're actually able to say that we are hiring again. I'm really excited about that. So again, the balancing plan, as we will discuss over the next few slides, has proven to be extremely successful. At the end of last fiscal year, all of the funds in the public that make up the public safety specialty funds carried positive balances, and we've now continued to hire officers and firefighters. What we'll be talking about over the next couple of slides are the 3 public safety dedicated funds, and they consist of the following. The first is Proposition 301. It is a 0.1% increment sales tax that was approved by voters back in 1993. It is allocated currently between police, fire, and neighborhood block watch, 70% to police, 25% fire, and 5% to block watch. The second fund is the Public Safety Enhancement Fund, also known as PSEF. That was passed it was a franchise agreement with our utilities in 2005, and it is a 2% utility tax. It's currently allocated at 62% going to police and Office of Emergency Management and Homeland Security, and 38% to fire. And the third fund that makes up this collection of funds is our Proposition 1, which was passed by voters back in 2007, and it is a 0.2% increment on the sales tax, and it is split 80% police, 20% fire. As the city manager mentioned, these funds were greatly impacted negatively by the Great Recession. We actually came to the council back in October of 2010 because we saw a trend. We saw a negative deficit starting to accumulate. At that point in time, we projected a $47 million shortfall if no action had happened by the end of fiscal year 9-10. But what we did, we worked with our counterparts in police, we worked with our counterparts in fire, as well as labor, as well as this council, and we developed a plan. What this chart shows is it shows why we had such an issue. For 5 consecutive years, starting in fiscal year 8-9, our expenditures outpaced our revenue. And so these funds were accumulating a negative deficit. That deficit was growing by about $28 million a year. Again, we developed a plan. That plan was largely and holistically based on no layoffs of police officers and firefighters. We also decided that we were going to, by doing that, we would be eliminating that deficit through attrition, which meant at the time that the deficit would continue to grow until we got to a point in which our expenditures or our revenue started to outpace our expenditures. We also committed, and the fire and police departments committed to actively seeking and pursuing grant opportunities. That is something that they've been extremely successful in doing over the last couple of years with SAFER grants as well as COPS and universal hiring grants. We also committed, both departments committed to improving and identifying efficiencies, ways to have officers and firefighters return to the field rather than doing administrative work. So when we talked about the revenues, we talked about the Great Recession and the impact that those revenues, the impact that recession had on our revenues. This chart really shows from an expenditure standpoint why we had trouble with our expenditures outpacing our revenue. What this chart shows is our public safety pension rates for both police and fire. The red line being the police or the fire department rate, the blue line representing our fire department rate. And what this shows is in 2007, 2008, the City of Phoenix contribution, or the rate that we pay, was roughly 20% for police and fire. That meant for every $10,000 in compensation, we sent $2,000 to the state to administer the pension plan. Conversely, those rates now for the upcoming fiscal year, 17-18, are projected to be at 63% for fire and 67% for police. So what that means is instead of paying $2,000 per $10,000, we are now paying $6,300 and $6,700 per $10,000 of compensation. To put a finer point on that discussion, an officer or firefighter that was roughly $80,000 in fiscal year 2007, 2008 meant we sent to the pension system $16,000 in pension contributions for that particular officer or firefighter. Fast forward to next year, that same $80,000 firefighter or police officer, we now are contributing $50,000 for a firefighter and $53,000 for a police officer based on compensation. For comparison, again, we've discussed this over the last couple of months. These rates, the black line represents our legacy employees in our COPERS plan, our civilian pension plan. And as you can see, back in 07-08, those rates were roughly 12%. Next year, those rates are expected to be 32%. And again, that shows, and if you look at that line, you see it starting to flatten out. That reflects the impact of pension reform. The impact of pension reform that this council and the community has been actively pursuing. And the purple and yellowish line that you see there, that is the impact of our pension reform on our new employees, our Tier 2 and Tier 3 employees. And you see those rates going from roughly 18% to 26% for next fiscal year. Now I want to take a little bit of time and walk you through a couple of little bit more complex slides, but I'm going to take some time to kind of go through these with you. So this slide shows fire field staffing levels since 2001 through next fiscal year. And what you can see is in fiscal year 2000-2001, fire had just under 1,300 filled fire positions. They peaked in 2008-2009, about a year after Prop 1 passed. They had roughly 1,600, almost 1,700 firefighters. And again, based on the resources that we have available, what we've been talking to you about over the last couple of years, we think we can sustain, with the existing amount of resources we have between these funds and the general fund, 1,615 firefighters. So, give me a moment. So that is roughly a 28% increase since 2000-2001. Conversely, at the same point in time, one of the largest drivers on staffing levels are calls for service. So what this slide shows are the fire department calls for service between 2000 and 2001 and projected through next fiscal year. And as you can see, in 2000, 2001, the fire department took roughly 130,000 calls that fiscal year. And as you can see, they held flat for most of the 2000s. And then last fiscal year, in 2015-16, they hit about 180,000 calls. And this year and next year, we're projected to hit about 200,000 calls. So what happens when you take those two slides and mesh them together? And that's what we're going to do right now. So let me orient you to the way this slide works. It's a dual-axis slide, so it's a little bit complicated for some to grasp because of the complexity in what's on the slide. On the right side, what you see is the x-axis. That will be our call volume. So that will be the slide that will correspond to the bar graph that we just looked at. On the left-hand side, you see our x-axis for our filled positions in fire. So again, you see our call volume in fire going from roughly 130,000 calls up to 200,000 calls projected in 17-18. Now we overlay with that slide the staffing, the filled staffing levels in fire. And what you see is, again, we were ramping up as Prop 1 came on in 2008, 2009, and then we started to draw those resources down because of the balancing plan that we're discussing here today. But at the last 3 years, you see fire calls for service starting to increase. What this slide does, it affords us an opportunity to really look at the correlation between calls for service and staffing levels. So back in 2000, 2001, for every filled fire position, those firefighters were taking about 100 calls per firefighter based on the filled count, the ratio between filled count and calls for service. This fiscal year, next fiscal year, that ratio changes to about 119 calls. So about 16 more calls per filled fire position over the course of the last 15, 16 years. So again, what are we doing? We are hiring, as the city manager mentioned. So we have restored hiring in the fire department and the police department. What this slide shows is that between now and the end of fiscal year 1920, we anticipate replacing 180 firefighters to maintain our 1,615 sustainable filled position count. You'll notice that this fiscal year and next fiscal year, you'll see an elevated account up and above that 1,615. That's really due to the staffing of the SAFER grants. We've got the 50 SAFER grants, which the fire department is working on filling those positions now, and we also have a couple of older SAFER grants that will be expiring. The thought is that once those grants expire, again, we have to return back to what our resources can sustain without causing a deficit, and that's what our 1615 count represents. And again, the 180 firefighters that we're talking about hiring between now and the end of 1920, that is the minimum number of firefighters that we will hire. Those are based on known retirements. Any unexpected retirements that we have in between now and then, we'll replace those two up to our 1,615 filled count. So now we're going to switch and talk about the same metrics from a police department standpoint. Back in 2000, 2001, our police department had just under 2,700 filled police officer positions. Like fire, because of the passage of Prop 1, we started to ramp up hiring in 2007, 2008, and 2008, 2009. The police department peaked in 2008, 2009, just like fire, with 3,375 officers. And again, based on our available resources and known resources projected and known today, we think we can sustain 3,125 police officers. So again, looking at call volume for our police department. As you can see, back in 2000, 2001, the police department took roughly 870,000 calls that year. As you can see, that decreased, and it continued to decrease and then about 2009, 2010 was the low point, and they hit about 592,000 calls that fiscal year. Since then, we've seen small incremental increases in their call volume. They're up to about 640,000 calls estimated last fiscal year, this fiscal year, and next fiscal year. So it has gone up, but now I want to do the same thing we just did with fire with the police data. So again, on the right side, our x-axis, orienting you to our call volume. Left axis will be our filled staffing counts. So again, you see the call volume going from 800,000 down to just over 600,000 calls. So now we take our police officer filled counts, and you can see again, early on in the 2000s, the filled counts were going up to try and keep pace with our call volume. And then as a result of the Public Safety Fund Balancing Plan, we started to draw those resources down. We started to draw down our filled counts. And again, we're projected to go up to 3,125 positions over the next couple of years. But you also see, again, like I mentioned in the fire department, back in 2000, 2001, For every filled position, each one of those officers were taking 330 calls per year. Today, they're taking 230 calls per year based on their call volume. So that's a decrease of 100 calls per filled position over that span of time. So again, this is an important chart to kind of show the correlation between staffing and call volume. And again, this hiring chart shows what we plan at a minimum to hire between now and the end of fiscal year 1920. We anticipate that we will hire 490 police officers between that time frame. And again, that's the minimum. That reflects just what we know is going out the door through drop. We will also hire and replace those positions that unexpectedly leave the department, up to 3,125. So again, the highlight of this presentation is that we are hiring again. Again, 490 officers and 180 firefighters between now and the end of 1920. We think we can maintain, based on existing resources and the projections that we're currently working with, 3,125 filled police positions, 1,615 firefighter positions, and those are up from lows of 2,740 police officer positions and 1,546 firefighter positions. Again, we're going to keep our eye on rising pension costs because, again, with a limited amount of resources, that presents the biggest challenge to sustaining those numbers that we're shooting for. And again, we will continue to monitor hiring. We continue to work very closely with both police and fire. We meet constantly and talk about changes to the hiring plan and giving them additional positions as they become available. We will closely monitor these fund balances because we do not want to be here ever again in this position. And so with that, I turn it over to the city manager for questions.
Mayor, that concludes that presentation.
All right, Chief, any comments you'd like to make? As long as you're here. Thank you for coming.
Well, thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of council. What BNR didn't mention was the great opportunity for us to travel out of state and recruit. So they've restored some funding for us for that to begin that process. So that is going to be a huge win, we hope, for us in reaching out to different parts of the country. So I wanted to make sure that I put that in there. So thank you very much to the city manager and to BNR for that.
Thank you very much. I think all of the council and myself have heard that they felt that the leadership of the plea felt that was hurting our ability to recruit talent from around the country, and that's a great thing, so I'm glad to hear that, certainly. Chief?
Mayor, members of council, thank you for the opportunity to be here. Although we didn't get additional funding for out-of-state travel, when we do travel, we make a point of reaching out to local communities to try to recruit firefighters. We have our 5 affinity groups, and we do a great job of getting folks that are qualified for the job, and we'll continue that, even though we didn't get additional funding.
Mr. City Manager, would you like to talk about the disparity between police and fire? No, all right. All right, well, now turn to members of the council. This is obviously not for action, just an update on the public safety funds balancing plan and the new.
Just one question.
Council, please, of course.
You talk a little bit in the police about pursuing opportunities to use more civilians. Could you just talk about that briefly and how that might affect or impact the hiring of officers?
Thank you to you, Councilwoman Stark, for that question. So as one of the previous slides mentioned from Mr. Barton, we talked about efficiencies. So in looking forward to the future, we're looking at putting civilians in key positions where a police officer might come out and take an accident report. Do we necessarily need a gun-carrying person to do that? And then a perfect example of that would be our centralized booking section, where we have officers who are filling that function right now that we're looking at civilianizing that. So we are developing a plan that includes community outreach to make sure we properly educate the public on what's going on, but that's definitely one of the efficiencies that we're looking at for next year.
Mayor, Councilman Stark, so if we were doing it purely as a budget savings exercise, we would eliminate a sworn position and replace it with civilians, and that would be a cost savings because civilians are less expensive because they're less trained than officers. That's not what we're planning to do, because we've heard clearly from you all in the community that 3125 is a minimum staffing number you want. So it may be that we have to add some budget capacity, and the council would have to decide that. But what it does is it makes those 3,125 officers more effective, because their time is used for things that truly a sworn officer only could do, and we can peel off pieces that a civilian could do, and that gets to a conversation Councilman Nowakowski and I had earlier, which is about response time, particularly on priority 3 calls, which is frustrating to people, that we might be able to make a dent in response times by having civilians take on some jobs that police officers have been doing. And I know the chief, you're working internally with some of those opportunities.
Yes, sir. We're working through that as a committee and group, and then we'll make that presentation hopefully soon.
Thank you. Other comments from the council? Councilman Nowakowski?
You know, can you go back to that chart where it talks about police staffing and calls and services from 2000 to 2016? Representing a Hispanic community, I can understand why 2007 to 2016 is a big drop. We have a lot of individuals that are afraid to call the police, a lot of individuals that are victims of crime, but because of their immigration status, they're just afraid. So I can see where the SB 1070 that passed in 2010, and you can see prior to that, the debate, the raids that were going on, that you have 40% of our population in the city of Phoenix happen to be Latino. And a large chunk of that happen to be individuals that are here with work visas, student visas, and they're just afraid. And I believe that the service calls would be a lot higher if the environment at that time, or during this time also with the new president, wasn't the way it is now. So you have an underground community right now that's afraid to call for services, afraid to even use the libraries or the parks. So I think that's, these numbers show that there's a decrease on the calls, and I believe that's true, but I believe that there is a need out there that once we have some type of immigration reform in our country, that individuals will start to use the services that they pay for when they buy clothing or anything with their tax dollars that provide all these different services for them. The other thing too is that we go to meetings, and I know all of my colleagues here, we always hear that we need more police officers, that our neighborhoods aren't safe, that our houses are broken into, our cars are broken into, and that we have to wait anywhere from 3 to 8 hours for a police officer, and then we explain to them about top priority calls and all that. And I know that the chief and I and the city manager's been in conversations of maybe hiring part-time retired officers to come back and maybe use them to deal with those types of calls, and to actually give individuals some hints on how to protect their houses, and seeing that they have all those years of service behind them and all that knowledge. So I know that we're working on that right now, and I understand that there's a sense of emergency out there in a lot of the block watch groups that we're listening to, and that they feel that there's a lot more crime out in their neighborhoods. Just because the calls are down, it doesn't mean crime is down also out there. So I just don't want people to get a false feeling of that our crime is down because the calls are down. I don't believe it's true. I believe that we need more officers out there, and we as a city need to figure out a way to provide that. And I just want to thank our staff for everything we're doing, my colleagues too. We're in an increase of hiring new police officers and firefighters. I think we're in the right direction, but we need to continue that direction, even though that these numbers are saying that we're safe, but I don't believe so. Thank you.
Any other comments, Councilwoman?
It wasn't very clear on the fire and police side and the way it was broken out or I broke out the numbers, so forgive me on the fire side. In looking at the numbers and me tallying all the different numbers and categories, it looks like there's 227 retirements by June 2020. And in doing the math, it looks like we're not hiring those 200 or replacing those 227 retirements.
That is correct, Councilwoman. As I mentioned, throughout this period that you see on this chart, the plan is to hire 180 firefighters to replace that 227, okay. Because ultimately you have 50 positions right now, a little more than 50 because we have some other SAFER grant positions. When those grant funds expire, those positions and our ability to sustain those positions goes away with it. So the intent of this slide and the intent of the hiring plan is centered around the concept of 1,615 officers or firefighters are what our resources can sustain. So the intent is when those grants expire, those positions will not be filled. We go back to 1,615.
So what's sustaining is what I'm hearing from you is the grants. And as soon as those grants go away, then those positions go away.
That is correct.
Well, that's yeah, I will probably have to look at that. The other piece is, I guess, in the calls, because as Councilman Nowakowski mentioned, police. I think we're also going to see a large drop in calls today, if it hadn't happened tomorrow. Meaning with the way things are happening in our country, we're going to see less and less people calling that are fearful of the police or have witnessed a crime or have been a victim. So, and it goes back now to the numbers, because if we're going by this data, and we know what the history was in 2007 and further, then it's not necessarily accurate. And like everyone else in the neighborhoods, I am hearing more and more issues of we need more police officers in our neighborhood. Now, I'm not sure if it's more of just the fact that there's a police officer in the neighborhood and people feel safe or people are around the neighborhood. I'm a strong believer of proactive policing and really looking at the measures of how we can continue to support proactive policing. Because I think once there's proactive policing and neighborhoods working together in protecting their neighborhoods, then there's a synergy within them and an energy that happens that then they take ownership of that area. But with the increase of transient and homelessness and just the increase of that, or the presence of that in neighborhoods, makes people feel unsafe. And I'm not sure what the solution is, but I also feel like now that we put more officers on patrol, we've also taken more officers from our proactive policing area, and we have decreased it. And so that's a fine balance to do, because I think we'll be back, as we have seen, 2 or 3 years from now pushing for more of those programs that we have now just not necessarily eliminated, but reduced in and added on more responsibilities to others. And so I'm just very cautious as we move forward. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Any other comments? Councilman Nowakowski, please.
Mary, addressing fire. So once we lose that 50 positions because of our safety grants are gone, do we have a plan? Would it work with 1,615 firefighters? Because I know that we have that triangle within 3 minutes or so. Individuals are there, a paramedic's there. If you're having a heart attack, if a person's drowning, every single second counts. And I know that our fire stations are positioned so that they're within that triangle, so that if a loved one needs a paramedic, that paramedic's there. So I just want to make sure that if that drop of the 50 individuals, that if we have some type of a plan, if we're going to be shorthanded, if we need to start advocating and making sure to fill those 50 positions in the future, to make sure that we have enough staff to cover those areas. Chief.
Councilman Nowakowski, Mayor, members of council, we will keep our minimum staffing on our fire trucks. So when somebody calls 911, they're going to get a fire truck with 4-person staffings in there. What we'll have to do is shift folks from staff positions back out to the field and do a set of things. But the customers or the community members will not suffer because we reduce our staffing levels to the 16-15.
And Chief, the other thing that really is hurting us also is that we used to have a prevention program out there. I know that we used to be on the high end with drowning, especially in the West Valley, and we really worked that with all of the prevention programs and grants that we were able to get from the federal government. All those are eliminated, so I know that, we've already had a drowning this weekend of a young person, a 2-year-old. I think that these prevention programs help, from teaching kids how to ride a bicycle and look both ways and all that, and we've kind of eliminated most of those programs. So I think that we really need to look in the future to making sure that we're not just filling those paramedics and firefighters that we need, but also looking into prevention programs that have helped us in the long run to save lives also.
Just for a little clarification, Councilman Nowakowski, Mayor, Council, is we had 11 CESs, which are the community education specialists, and we have 3 now because the rest of them have been moved to the field. What we've done is shifted some of those responsibilities to the firefighters working on fire trucks that go out into the community to community events to share that message, because the Learn Not to Burn program, Urban Survival, is very instrumental in safety and survival of the community. So we haven't eliminated them in their entirety. We've just shifted the workload back to the firefighters, which is, again, increasing their workload. And we still are aggressively pursuing grants to continue to hopefully get some additional grants to fund some of those positions.
Thank you, Chief.
Mayor, Councilman Nowakowski, there's one underlying story here, and it plays itself out in 2 ways between police and fire. So the underlying story is what we're showing is what we can sustain with the revenue we have. When you look at those charts Jeff showed you from Proposition 301, Proposition 1, the utility tax, and the general funds we put in, we can afford 1,615 firefighters and 3,125 police officers. In this case, with fire, what it says is we're going to have a challenge when the federal grants go away by late 2018. So the challenge with fire is to continue to work to see if there are federal grants to replace those. On the police side, the story is that the council has put lots of resources. In fact, you all voted to increase the number that we could sustain with the transportation funding. We actually got it up to 3125, and we're going to be doing a lot to get there. I think the issue with police is continuing to be able to hire and do some of those things that the community has told you that they want us to do proactively. But we're not even to that point yet. We've got 200 more officers net to fill. And so people are going to start feeling that impact over the next 18 months as Chief Williams gets 200 more bodies actually out on the street and available.
If I may, Mr. Mayor, members of council too, we just had the reallocation, and Councilwoman Pastor mentioned it, we just had the reallocation of employees back to the patrol function. So yes, there is going to be a little bit of give in some aspects, but we're really hoping that we're going to increase our net value by having more people out there on the street to answer calls for service.
All right, Councilwoman, please.
This is to the city manager. I heard 2018. We are 2017. How many firefighters would be affected by the 2018 grant going away?
So I think the difference between the 1615 and the peak at 1643 is 28. So we would not, again, we would do this through attrition, or we would look to whatever grants the federal government may come up with to replace the SAFER program. But the difference between the peak in 18 at 1643 and the sustainable number is 28 positions.
20, okay. Yeah. It says 27, so that's why I was...
Oh, that 27 is the number of hires, but the difference between the total filled would be 28.
Okay.
At the peak to the sustainable number. I'm on the right column, I'm sorry, yeah.
Okay, got it. What?
Please.
So the grant fades out. So does that mean we just don't hire 28? more firefighters? And the fire, we
Correct.
sustain the ones that we? Okay.
Correct.
All right. I was just wondering.
Unless there is some replacement program. And we have been very successful as a city and the partnership with the fire service in getting SAFER grants. I think it's a little bit up in the air, Chief. Maybe you can speak more to what's the current state of SAFER grants and what people are looking at.
Mayor, members of council, as the manager mentioned, is we have been very successful. We've gotten 6 SAFER grants to a little over $50 million over the last several cycles. The new cycle's coming up for SAFER, and opposed to being a 2-year cycle, it's going to be a 3-year cycle. And instead of 100% costs, including pension costs, it's going down to 75%. So there'll be 25% matching funds, then it goes to 50%, and then it goes to 30% on the 3rd year. So the federal government's changing their protocol, and we'll have to look at financing to look at the ability for us to continue to apply for these and what where the matching funds come from.
So then to me, that would be a challenge in the future.
Yes.
Because it's not 100%. Now we're doing a match. And in the SAFER grant, as the years roll out, say the 3rd year, is the matching grant, then we sustain them for the future? Or do you know?
I'm sorry, Councilwoman, I don't understand the question.
I'm saying they're getting hired and we have to match. So the first year we match 25%, the second year 30%, and then say the 3rd year 50%.
I think
The 4th year.
Yeah, I think we would expect that they would have a
sustain them for 100
requirement.
years. I mean, for 100%.
I don't think we know, but it would be logical that they would have some requirement for maintaining the position for some period of time after it expires. But I don't think those rules have been written, but yes, I think that's what you've said is a safe assumption.
And the reason why I'm asking is because I oversee certain grants, and in the grant, once it phases out, it is sustainable. The purpose of the grant is in order to sustain that position within the general fund. I'll use the general fund, but within a budget. So that's why I'm asking, okay, we're going to now phase into this. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Other members of the council, questions about the Public Safety Funds Balancing Plan update?
Mayor, may I?
Vice Mayor, please.
Thank you. One of the areas that's very important to my constituents is the precinct boundaries, and I hear a lot of concerns about the Estrella Maryville precinct being larger than the city of San Francisco. We're certainly doing things to improve response times, but I think my constituents are eager to get an update on that particular process and re-precincting. So if we could talk a little bit about, maybe Chief, what we're doing to improve response times in the Maryville precinct, and any other updates on that item.
So Vice Mayor, members of council, thank you for that question. As it stands right now, we're hoping, Vice Mayor, that the reallocation of employees back to patrol will help alleviate and minimize some of those response times that we have. Keeping in mind, in order to increase that boundary or stretch the boundary, we need to have more employees. So as we progress to the future, that is something that we can look at. I'll be honest, it's not something that I can consider right now, but looking forward into the future, would love to meet with you and your constituents to talk about what that will look like to increase our footprint.
Wonderful, thank you. And I think we should just always be looking at the current map. I'm not convinced that using freeways as boundaries is necessarily the most efficient way, and so maybe within the existing precincts, if there are tweaks we can make to level out response times for priority 3 calls across the city, that would also be very valuable.
Thank you very much. Other members of the council? All right, thank you for the update. We appreciate it very much. Next item on the agenda is another, not an action item, an update on our 5-year general fund forecast. Mr. City Manager, Mr. Barton.
Thank you, Mayor. We'll slide right into that as we get the PowerPoint put up. This is the second month of the year, and it's our second major presentation on the budget. As you said, Mayor, it is the 5-year forecast, and that is a financial best practice for cities to have preparation on their budget position more than a year in advance. It is a strategic planning tool that guides our exertion of effort in making decisions on the general fund budget. And the general fund budget is actually a reflection of our values as a community. The two largest investments we make are public safety, which is about 73% of the general fund budget, and community services, about 15%, and that would be libraries, parks, youth, seniors, neighborhoods. Just as a reminder, the 5-year general fund forecast builds from basic assumptions. Jeff's going to describe those. It looks ahead at what could happen if the assumptions are reasonable and if there's no exertion of effort on our part. But what we know is when we do that, we take a look at resources, expenditures, and then we determine future surplus or deficit. On the resource side, it's taxes, fees, grants, interest, transfers, which means money perhaps that the aviation department pays for police officers to serve at the airport, and the fund balance. On the expenditure side, what do our employees cost us? And that is our biggest cost, is our employees as a service business. The equipment they need, the contracts with companies to provide services, and the commodities. And after you subtract one from the other, you either have a surplus to do new things, or you have a deficit which you have to solve through existing program services or revenues. The main message, and then in future years, of course, we look at the economy, the inflation, known increases, and make a projection. The main message here today is this: preparation plus exertion equals success. That's been the pattern that we've had in Phoenix. When we prepare in advance, we have the time to do the hard work it takes to make a city we can all be proud to live in. So preparation plus exertion has been our pattern over the last several years, where we look ahead beyond just 1 year, see what we need to do, and roll up our sleeves and get to work. So for example, last year at this exact time in 2016, we had a preparation of, we potentially could have had a deficit this year of $9 million to $30 million if we had done nothing. And in fact, we did something. The council took a leadership position, and what we know is that the budget that year that will start in July coming up will be balanced. And so that deficit, we worked it through. Today, we're going to have a forecast, which Jeff will talk to you about, which is about preparing for the future. And we have potentially, if we take no actions, another deficit a year out from now, largely with public safety pension fund growth, the third year of our labor contracts, and some capital needs. And we know that we have to do some hard work to get to success. Also, we know that our main challenge, as I said, lies in our pension obligations. We looked at this slide last month, and I just want to go back to it. The state Supreme Court has clearly defined the limits on what we are able to do about our pension obligations, which is we have to meet them, and we can't change the rules of the game on existing employees. On the civilian side, which we call COPERS, the COPER system, the council's made significant reforms, and we are seeing the results of that. We have yet to see the results of reform on public safety because it is so new. This slide shows over the period from 2007 to 2016, our general fund revenues went up by about $38 million. That's the orange bar on the left. Our pension obligations in the general fund alone went up $95 million. So what that says is that every bit of effort and exertion and ingenuity that we put towards our budget had to go to close the gap between new revenues and increased existing expenses. We know that the community wants more of our services, not less, and so we have to continue to find ways to be creative with continuing strategies on costs, on how much service we provide, where we provide the service, who provides the service, how many times we provide the service, and whether we have the right revenue to provide the service. Those are all questions that we go with over and over and over in our budget process and what we'll work on. So Jeff will now walk through the detail of the forecast for the next 5 years, and then we'll answer questions.
So Mayor, members of the council, as Ed mentioned, the 5-year forecast is not a policy document. It does not require any action. It's really a roadmap. It kind of helps us make smart decisions. In putting the 5-year forecast together, we look at both revenues and our expenditures. We're going to start today's presentation talking about our revenue assumptions. Number one, the 5-year forecast that we're presenting today assumes no future fee increases or decreases and no new sources of revenue. The increases that we're expecting or anticipating over the life of this 5-year forecast are purely tied to the economy, the health of the economy, population, and things of that nature that are naturally growing our revenue streams. Again, annual revenue growth rates over this 5-year forecast range from 2.9% to 4.3%. And I want to emphasize again that, you know, based on some feedback that we received from this council over the last few years, we continue to work alongside with our partners at the University of Arizona to develop these revenue estimates. We've actually are in the process now of engaging them in providing some additional updates to the econometric model that we've built. But that work with U of A has proven itself to be extremely valuable over the last couple of years as our revenue estimates have gotten extremely accurate. This 5-year forecast, or the multi-year forecast that we're presenting today, it also does not reflect a recession. One of the things I want to emphasize, and Ed also mentioned it earlier, is that a multi-year forecast is a best practice. The question as to whether or not you do a 5-year versus a 3-year or a 4-year is the question. Many agencies and institutions have actually started to deviate from a 5-year forecast, and they're going more towards a 3-year forecast. The reason being is, again, the out years are so volatile. You can't really make heads or tails out of what's going to happen in some of those future years. And that's one of the reasons why we don't anticipate or try to reflect a recession in our 5-year forecast. Next item is we continue, this 5-year forecast assumes the continuation of the council's policy to maximize the primary property tax rate. Any deviation from that policy would require a corresponding reduction to existing general fund programs and services or expenditures. Next, we assume no negative action based on state action to shared revenues. And finally, again, as I mentioned, the upper and lower ranges of our forecast increase slightly in the later years, and that reflects the economic volatility in our forecast. So over the next couple of weeks, where we are now, we're in our process known as 7+5. We're evaluating our resources and our expenditures for the current fiscal year as well as next fiscal year. Over the next couple of months, leading up to March 21st, when we come back with the trial budget, we'll continue to monitor these things. But here are a few things on revenue that we're looking at and continuing to monitor before we actually set firm revenue estimates for that trial budget. Holiday sales tax reports. We don't yet have those in. We should be getting those in within the next couple of weeks. Those holiday sales tax reports are extremely important for us because they give us a good indication of the health of the economy, not just for this year, but also as a jumping off point for next fiscal year. We're also keeping our eye on a couple of items that and I won't go into detail, we've discussed these previously, that we're calling state issues. Census impact, as you know, state shared revenue is shared based on relative population. Again, we are seeing those changes now will happen every year as opposed to mid-decade and census years. There's also some discussion at the state level about contracting sales tax as well as income tax. JLBC actually in their last fiscal highlight that we just actually received today, they referenced that corporate income tax collections have actually decreased, and so they're kind of watching those. And then we also have the timing issues that we're experiencing on our TPT reform or our tax simplification reform. As you know, the state took over collections for all cities and towns January 1st of this fiscal year. And we continue to monitor other revenue streams that are not tax-based, such as ETS or our ambulance billing revenue and our municipal court revenues. So now we'll switch over to our expenditure assumptions. Again, the other half of our budget equation. Our expenditures, operating expenditure growth is based on historical growth rates and CPI. For the purposes of this forecast, those range between 1% and 2.5%. And our pension costs are based on current actuarial information. It's based on the work that's done by our COPERS actuary, Chiron, and based on the work of GRS, or Gabriel Roeder Smith, who is the state's PSPRS pension actuary. And compensation costs are based on the current labor contracts, which are those contracts that we entered into this fiscal year, which restore employee compensation equal to 4.2% over 3 fiscal years, concluding in fiscal year 18-19. We also assume that we will continue to maintain our contingency fund at roughly 4%. That requires an increase in the contingency fund of about $2 million per year. And finally, just like on our revenue assumptions, the upper and lower ranges of our expenditure forecast increase slightly in the later years to, again, reflect that volatility and the uncertainty of looking that far ahead. So again, we've talked about our revenue assumptions. We want to talk now, again, a little bit more detail about our expenditure assumptions. We've talked at great detail last presentation as well as last month's presentation about the impact of our pension cost and the growth of those pension costs over the next couple of years. This slide shows that cost compared to our baseline year of 07-08. And as you can see, this first chart that is emerging now, those are our COPERS costs, our civilian pension costs. You can see in fiscal year 2007, 2008, those costs were roughly $40 million to the general fund. This fiscal year, they're $86 million. Next year, we anticipate those costs to increase by $1 million based on, again, the current actuarial information that we have, and we see those costs increasing to $106 million by the final year of our 5-year forecast. Next, what you see emerging are the anticipated costs for our public safety pension costs, those costs associated with our police and fire pensions. And again, 07-08, our pension costs were $56 million. Current fiscal year, $150 million. Those costs are expected to increase next fiscal year by $57 million to $207 million in the general fund. And as you can see, 216 in 18-19, 223 in 19-20, and ultimately 235 in fiscal year 2020-21-22. And again, I emphasize these are based on current actuarial assumptions. They could change. When we look at our budget and we exclude pension from the mix, so this slide shows everything but pension. So all employee compensation line items minus pension, all contractual line items, all commodities, and all capital expenditures. And what you can see is in fiscal year 2007, 2008, we spent roughly $1.1 billion. This fiscal year's budget is $987 million. Next year's projection, based on our current estimates, are $972 million. And as you can see, we are anticipating those costs, even through fiscal year 21-22, to be less than 2007, 2008. I'll explain the dip in 19-20, but it's really tied to the deficit that Ed mentioned earlier that we're projecting right now for fiscal year 18-19.
The important thing about this slide is that it shows that excluding pension, we have really got control of our costs. When you have that dramatic a decrease, that's really what we've all been working on the last several years.
So now when we put the revenue assumptions and the expenditure assumptions together, we get our 5-year forecast view. And so what this is walking through that. So again, instead of a $9 to $30 million deficit, which we were talking about this time last year, we're projecting that we are balanced for 17-18, showing resources and expenditures equal to $1.266 billion. In fiscal year 18-19, we are anticipating resources to fall somewhere between $1.231 billion and $1.248 billion. And our expenditures, based on current known costs, which include the third and final year of our employee compensation and known pension increases, are $1.295 billion to $1.291 billion. That creates a potential shortfall of $43 to $64 million. As you know, by city charter and state statute, we are required to adopt a balanced budget. So for the remainder of this forecast, the next 3 fiscal years, we assume that that deficit is solved not through revenue, but through expenditure reductions. And that's why you see the dip in fiscal year 18-19 when you compare those expenses to the expenses in fiscal year 18-19. So 19-20 expenses are less than that in 18-19 because we're assuming that we solve our deficit by reducing expenditures in fiscal year 18-19. What this shows, though, is if we manage that and if we prepare, like the city manager has already talked about, we fix and solve that problem, then you see the next 3 fiscal years after that, we show balanced budgets and up to potential surpluses of $42 to $85 million over the next couple of years. And with that, one other thing I want to emphasize is the 5-year forecast. Again, we talked about public safety funds and the sustainable number of officers and firefighters. The 5-year forecast does not assume any additional funding beyond 3,125 police officers and 1,615 firefighters. The 5-year forecast also does not assume any additional funding for body cameras beyond the $5 million that we currently have in the set-aside, as well as we also don't assume any additional funding currently beyond the $8 million that we have for critical vehicle replacements on an annual basis. And we know we will slowly start to have to increase our funding for police, patrol cars, fire apparatus, police helicopters possibly, as well as some of our other citywide fleet. We also know that our computer-aided dispatch system in the fire department is due for a replacement or an upgrade. It's over 23 years old, I believe, at the current time. And as many of you know, our fire department dispatches for over 29 agencies, including itself statewide, that through mutual aid agreements. Currently, fire, IT, and the finance procurement section are working on options for upgrading or replacing that system. Current estimates are about $16 to $18 million to do that. Those costs would be split 50-50 with our mutual aid partners based on call volume. We also are looking at other city facility and infrastructure needs. As we talked about last month, as the city ages, so too do its facilities, or so too does its facilities. Just last week, I believe this council approved a plan to replace the elevators in the City Hall building. We also working with Public Works and Finance now to address the fire life safety systems in City Hall and other city facilities. That project is estimated at about $5 million. As well as we know that the badging and security access and control system that Public Works manages is also due for a replacement at some point in this 5-year view. And again, Public Works and Finance are looking at that now currently. And then again, just being sound financially, we really need to evaluate options and opportunities to pay down our pension liability. And finally, throughout the month of April, after we present the trial budget on March 21st, we will, without doubt, hear from our residents that they want new services or expanded services, and those things will also come into play at some point in this 5-year viewpoint that we're talking about.
So Mayor, we have coming up, as you know, the schedule, we have a trial budget 4 weeks from today, and then we start the public hearings that you all host in your districts and citywide, followed by proposed budget in May and adoptions in June and July. So with that, we're happy to answer any questions that you might have at this point.
All right, thank you very much for the update. This is not an action item, so this is just an update for the council on the public on our 5-year forecast. I'll now turn it over to members of the council for any questions they may have for our city manager or our budget director. Councilman Waring.
Thank you, Mayor. Jeff, if I said, because this does not project any recession for 5 more years, which I assume would be an unprecedented string of no recession.
Councilman,
2009 to 2022.
You know, that's actually, it's a good question, and I think you've asked that question before. Depending upon which economist you talk to, you know, they measure things differently. Some economists saw what happened in 2014 as a softening of the economy, a sort of a mini recession, if you will. So if you follow the business cycle, 7 years from that point would be 2021-22. So at the end of this forecast, you theoretically could have another recession. But again, I don't have the capability, nor does my staff have the capability to determine when, in particular, a recession would be, or how severe, or what categories that recession would ultimately impact.
I mean, I can't gauge the likelihood, but just historically speaking, if you just look at it, it's a long way to go without one. If there was a recession, and I said the word, that would be a disaster for the city of Phoenix, would that be too strong?
I think so, Councilman. When you look at the 5-year forecast, and if we get past 18-19, if we figure out that deficit and adjust that, what you saw in that 5-year forecast, you saw potential surpluses. And so the way the 5-year forecast is constructed, with the upper and lower ranges, the optimistic, the pessimistic, and the baseline view, in theory, using those ranges, you are accounting for some economic volatility. And so, again, from that perspective, I don't know that I would say it would be catastrophic. I think, again, looking at the potential surpluses that we have once we get past 18-19, I think we've got a pretty good opportunity before us.
I think I said disaster.
Oh, disaster.
I think catastrophic is worse than disaster. I'm not sure, but we're quibbling. I think you took what I mean. I appreciate the answer. So sort of going along with on the public safety funds, you overlaid calls for service versus the number of employees. So I guess if I took the public safety plan where we're going to have more officers, peak at 3,125 in 2017, 2018, and I overlaid it, this chart from the previous presentation only goes up to 2020. But I assume going forward, you're also talking about 3,125, which is quite a few more officers than we have now. Is that realistic? Because we've got in 2019, 2020 on this chart, I think you have a page number on here, you're talking about spending $941 million. I think it sounded to me, correct me if I'm wrong, like you built in, we're going to get it lower because we need to get it lower.
Which slide are you referring to,
So
Councilman?
this one here.
Oh, okay. Let me go back to that one.
I just noticed that we're going to have peak officers at a time we're spending less than ever, or at least on this chart since 2007. Can both those things be true? I mean, I assume you accounted for it, but...
We did,
Okay.
and one of the things just to emphasize, Councilman, it's a good point you bring up. What we've been doing in the general fund is we've been, for the last 5 years, 6 years, since 2010, when we adopted that public safety funds balancing plan, we've ensured that almost 100% of the general fund police and fire positions are filled. So what we've been doing is taking position or people out of the specialty funds, moving them into vacant general fund positions. So the assumption is the general fund is always filled to the hilt, to the extent that it can. Where we're adding and where we're hiring positions into police and fire are in those specialty funds. So the projections that we have for the general fund include and continue the continuation of those filled positions in the general fund.
Okay. You know, I was a little concerned when I saw this, whether it was frankly realistic or not. I was hoping you would give the answer that frankly you just gave. One outcome of the downturn of 2007, 2008, or whatever you want to call it, was that we have a much higher percentage of our employees are public safety officers than it was before. I think it was like 35%, now it's more like 45%. I mean, it's been a pretty big shift to that. And of course, they're more expensive than the average employee. You got to train them and equipment and everything, but one thing I did want to ask about to that is the body cameras, the $5 million, since that contract is, I guess, in limbo, or we're not doing it right now or whatever, what happened to that money?
So from a budgetary standpoint for fiscal year 17-18, we are still showing that money sitting in a set-aside. So it has not been allocated. It's in reserve.
I mean, you use that word, but I don't remember there was any more
It's a-
detail.
it's
I
a-
don't remember we
It's
ever
a
got
separate
specifically
reserve
told.
aside from the contingency.
Okay, so when you do have a contract and you do have the cameras, I mean, I personally wanted to hire more officers. I think it was about, Ed, we agreed 40 officers. Was that what you could hire for the $5 million?
Yeah,
I think it was like 5.4 million. I don't want you to have to do it.
Yeah,
by memory.
it's probably around 100 at an average
Roughly.
cost per officer.
It's about $156,000 per officer right now, a little more.
About 40. But in any
I'm
case,
sorry,
that's
you're
what
right.
happened to the
It's
money
about
that's just sitting there.
40 or so, not 100, yeah.
Yeah, I understand. Okay, I mean, I guess it could be worse given the pension cost issue. You know, we've talked about this before, what you could really do about that, since that's the state system, not the city. The COPR system has at least leveled off. It's still going up, but it's not going up dramatic. Is this chart, I'm sorry, I don't see which page it's on, but the chart about the, maybe you guys can call it up here quicker than I can find it.
That one?
Is it going to keep going up kind of at the same rate? Is that just a linear, just keeps going up and up and up, or does
I
it
wish
ever
I had the
taper?
answer to that question, the definitive answer to that question. Again, this is based on work that's performed currently by our actuary, by the actuary for both pension systems. And what they're doing there, Councilman, is, again, they're taking a mix and a whole myriad of assumptions. How long people are living, so mortality rates, what the rate of return is on the pension system, all of those different things, payroll growth, all of those different things go into that pot, and it determines what we have to contribute to keep the pension fund at a particular level. So again, any one of those things changes, so too do the pension cost changes, because the rate will change. So again, I would say that right now, this is the best information that we have. I can't say for sure what's going to happen. Also, you know, there may be additional reform measures that get made going forward that would also have some impact on these rates as we look into the future.
The PSPRS board is looking at some things that they can do about assumptions, amortization schedules that would help. The thing I would just caution is, it's probably safe to assume that this number is not going to go down, because currently the funds are underfunded. They're at less than 50% funded. And so even if they were to find a way to make it go down, we should probably be putting at least this much money into it, so that into the future, the funding rate goes up.
And the court case that was just lost by the state, that's factored in here, I assume.
That's correct. That's in the rates.
And I mean, it looks like it's slowing down after 2018. But I assume the 235 number and the 228 number are less accurate than the, 207 and the 216.
I think that's fair to say that, yes.
Well, it doesn't look like it's getting any better, but at least it seems like it's tapering slightly anyway. Whether it's accurate or not, I guess we're going to find out. So, well, I appreciate the work that you spent on this. I think it's helpful. I know it's not the most accurate thing. I guess I just have one more question. So the labor contracts are up in June of 2019, is that right? So, and this assumes no pay raises or anything like that. Okay. I don't know how realistic that is either, but I know that you can't possibly know what that's going to look like in 3 years, or 2 years. All right, well, thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Councilman. Any other comments regarding the five-year budget forecast? This is update for this council and the public as we soon begin the public budgeting process here at the City of Phoenix. No other comments? No other items on our today's agenda. Meeting is adjourned.